Hello Bitcoiners, and welcome to another episode. This one's going to be a little bit outside my wheelhouse because I'm going to be talking about this here. And it's the PinePhone Pro. Here it is. Phone from Pine64. Why am I talking about this? Well, given the fact what happened in the past month or so, privacy is very important. And this phone here is one of the options that you have to keep the privacy and control it to ensure that your data is not given up in such a way that you have with iOS or Google phones. You have the option to de-Google your phone, but still de-Googling the phone. You don't have total control over everything, especially the hardware, since you don't know if it's been open source or not. This one here, depending who you talk to, the hardware is open source or mostly open source. But it predominantly runs Linux, so it doesn't run iOS or Android, although you could probably run Android on this. In fact, I believe you can, but it defeats the purpose. And this phone here gives you a lot of control over privacy that you don't have over different phones. So this is something that may be very important to Bitcoiners. It gives you a lot of control. But this phone comes with a caveat. It's still very much in development stage. It's not quite ready for prime time. Everyday use, it's hit and miss, more of a miss than anything else from what I understand, but still development is ongoing on this phone, which is really cool, and you could actually watch the development take place before your very eyes. This model here, I got the Explorer Edition. There was the Discover Edition, I think it was called, before this, and that one, well, if you think this one was in beta form, that one was probably considered alpha, and that's where you really had software that was not ready for, or the phone wasn't ready yet, but it just gives an opportunity for end users to get their hands in it, maybe provide feedback and develop on it. And here we are, we're now at the Explorers Edition here, and really cool. I just got it today, and yeah, I'd like to talk about it and do the unboxing, and every so often give an update on how it's working for me. I want to make this my daily driver eventually. This does run Linux. Somebody that has used Linux in the past, and I've rediscovered it again, which is awesome. Yeah, this is not a phone that is iOS or Android, because it is a privacy phone. It doesn't deal with any of those two operating systems, which have real issues with privacy. You definitely don't have control over it. In this phone, because it runs Linux, you do have a lot of control. Also, the hardware itself is open source or mostly open source, depending who you talk to, and you don't get that with other phones. So that's really cool. Now let's take a quick peek into this before we really dive into the specs and then opening the box up. So this is what we have here. I ordered this guy here. This is the PinePhone. Oh, this is actually the PinePhone and not pass this one up. This is the PinePhone Pro. Here we go. So it's $399. It was US at that, and it took, I think it cost me $80 on top of that for the import fees or the customs fees or whatever that DHL charged. So keep that in mind. That $80 or $85 was Canadian. So do the math. It's kind of a pricey phone, but not as pricey as others, and it is what it is. As you could tell, it's the Explorers Edition, as it's mentioned here. And it basically tells you what's inside it in terms of what to expect, who's it for, who's it not for. Because really, if you're thinking you're going to take this phone and you're going to run it as a daily driver, well, it isn't for you. It's not there yet. It may never get there, but certainly it's not there right now. Who it is for? Well, if you like Linux, if you like testing stuff, if you like working on stuff, if you're a coder, if you're a developer, if you like to be in that field, if you're into privacy, this is your phone, because it does have some interesting features in it, which we'll touch upon later on. And it's something which, for me, it appeals to me as an end user. I hope that I could somehow finagle this to make it work for me, but that remains to be seen. We'll see what happens. What's the difference between this and the PinePhone Pro, which I have, and the PinePhone? Well, the PinePhone, you get much less out of it. Like it's less RAM, less memory, and it's less and less. But the PinePhone, the original, it does cost a lot less. Remember, that was $399 for the Explorers Edition of the PinePhone Pro. Well, the PinePhone, which is much less powerful version of this, it's much cheaper. You could get it, in fact, as low as 149 US dollars plus the customs fee. So it's going to be a lot cheaper, but keep in mind that this particular model here, it is very underpowered. And although the software may be more advanced or in terms of the development stage than the PinePhone Pro, because this has been out a little bit longer, you're still going to be hindered by the fact that the hardware is lackluster, to say the least. So the PinePhone Pro gives you a little bit more future proofing, to say that's being generous, because the specs on this is okay. And before we get any further, we'll be talking about the specs, but I don't think I'm the best person to talk about it. I'm going to let my wife give a rundown on this, because this is more up her alley than it is mine. And with that being said, I'm going to bring her in and she could talk about the hardware.
Hello, my name is Daniela, and I'm going to walk you through the specs for the PinePhone Pro. So this device is not going to contain the latest SoCs. So for those of you familiar with flagships, you'd be looking at the Snapdragon 888 chipset, or most recently the Gen 1 chipset. The chipset on this device are more on the budget side. So you have the Rockchip RK3399S 64-bit SoC. It's at a 2x A72 and 4x A53 CPU score at a 1.5 gigahertz. The GPU is an ARM Mali T860 with a 4x core GPU at 500 megahertz. The RAM on this device is 4 gigabytes of LPDDR4 at 800 megahertz. So again, if you're looking for your latest and greatest, the typical baseline amount of gigabytes for RAM these days is about 8. This one has 4, and the RAM type is DDR4, whereas the latest and greatest is DDR5. Depending on your use of the device, you may or may not notice that difference. The storage capacity is a 128 gigabytes eMMC flash storage. It does have an optional micro SD card slot. For those of you who are interested, that's one area where flagship devices are no longer providing the extra expansion. The panel and display on this device is a 6-inch 1440 by 720 in-cell IPS, and is protected by Gorilla Glass 4. So again, not the latest and greatest in terms of the protection. The Gorilla Glass is now rated at Victus Plus for those of you who are in the flagship category, but Gorilla Glass 4 should provide some protection, but would recommend a screen protector. The cameras on this device, it's 13 megapixel Sony IMX258 main camera with, again, the Gorilla Glass 4 protection on top. And there's an 8 megapixel OmniVision OV8858 front-facing camera. So decent pictures, just not something with very high resolution. The modem and GPS, so it contains the Questel global GSM and CDMA bands. It also includes GPS, GPS-A, and GLONASS. Something to be aware of is this device does not have NFC. So if you are looking for a device that will provide the ability to tap to pay, this will not be it. But you can pair it with a Fitbit or some other type of wearable device that you can still accomplish that task. From the ports, you have a micro SD slot, as I've mentioned before. There's pogo pins, and there's a USB-C power slot. And the data speed is USB 3.0. From a sensors perspective, you have your typical sensors. So there's an accelerator, a gyroscope, the proximity sensor. You have the compass and an ambient light. For privacy and hardware switches, there's a camera switch, there's a microphone switch, there's Wi-Fi and Bluetooth switches. The LTE modem can also be toggled, as well as the headphone port. For external buttons, you have the volume up and down rocker, in addition to the power on and off buttons. For audio out, you have a headset speaker, an audio jack, which again is not typical for today's standards of devices, so very much appreciated to be included, and there's a loudspeaker. Then you also have a flash and torch button. So for those times where you need to access your keys or your key port, you have the ability to have a flashlight with you. There's the vibration motor, and essentially that's like your haptic system where you can feel a little sensation back when you're turning the device on and off, or if you're pressing keys. There's a status LED, and there's a UART via audio jack. For the battery, you're looking at a Samsung 3000 milliamp battery. And considering the specs of the device, this, although it's lower on the end of battery size, it should last quite some time, again, given the specs. For charging, you have a quick charge, 5 volt 3A 15 watt charger, and it's a USB power delivery. For dimensions, it's 160.8 by 76.6 by 11.1 millimeters. So it is a little bit on the thicker side, but overall, it is a fairly small device. For the weight, it's approximately 215 grams, and the price for this device and configuration is $399 US, and that does not include shipping and import taxes. Importing this device into Canada from Hong Kong, China, required approximately an additional 85 Canadian dollars to cover duties and VAT. And I hope with that, we've given you all the information you need to make your purchasing decision.
So thank you to my lovely wife Daniela for doing that breakdown of the specs. Clearly this is a little bit beyond or outside my wheelhouse, so she's much better at it than I am. So thank you to her for doing this work for us and giving us a breakdown of the hardware on this guy here. So obviously it's not the best hardware out there, but for the price point and for what you're buying, you're not going to be getting the top of the line. And this is something that's still in development, so and it's open source, so there's a lot of things to consider. And yeah, so I guess with that being said, we could probably go to the unboxing of this, which would be rather cool. So let's get at it. Let the games begin. And before I open this box here, as you can see, it's the Explorer Edition. It's hard to tell here; it's a little bit blurry, but I'll show a picture that you could see what is this here. And yeah, it came with this piece of paper. Maybe it's a little bit difficult to read, but I'll pause the video and you probably get a better gauge of what's on this piece of paper. But what I find interesting on this piece of paper is that it talks about some of the shortcomings right now because it's currently in development and it's still relatively new. But what's really funny is that it starts at number 5. Makes me believe that they've been cutting this back. It used to be numbers 1 to 4, and I suppose that they've rectified some of those shortcomings, and they just deleted them, and now printing stuff from 5 onwards. And maybe as things progress, number 5, number 6, and eventually 7 and 8 will come off this list too. So people ordering this in the future may not get the same piece of paper. Will probably be a shorter version that corrects some of the issues. So that's just something to consider. But the paper does talk about, the power management it's lacking right now. The PinePhone, the regular version, it does have better power management than this one. This one, when you put it to sleep per se, I'll give you an example. Like, here's my regular phone. When I use it and I put it to sleep, it kind of goes in a suspended state and it's not using as much power. Well, the PinePhone Pro doesn't have that just yet. The software isn't quite up to that level of sophistication. It will get there eventually, relatively soon, from what I understand. Talks about the camera not being functional right now, which is kind of odd, and I'll explain the reason why I find it's odd momentarily. And yeah, there's a couple other quirks that needs to be worked out in not too distant future, but I think we can move on to finally unboxing this, and this is the moment of truth. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hope for the best. Let's see what we get here. Hopefully everything's working and there's no problems with the hardware. And voila, here we go. We have now a opened box ready to show the world what it conceals inside here. And let's take a peek. Let's open her up and see what we got in here. What sort of goodies are included into this. It could be just nothing, or exactly what I was expecting it to be, a phone. And the moment of truth. Here comes the manual. We'll chuck that aside. Screen protector. My wife is much better than I am at applying that to the phone. And here it is. In all its glory, the PinePhone. What else is included is a red charging cable. Red, I don't know why they chose that color, but it is what it is, and now I can identify which charging cable came with the PinePhone Pro box, and there's nothing else. There's no power brick, no nothing. Hopefully you have a bunch of those lying around at home like I do. I have so many of those power bricks. But one thing to consider about this type of phone, you don't want to use a low wattage or low amperage, I forget which one the term is, power brick. The reason being is that this phone here is well, because the power management thing is still not finished yet. If the battery ever does run out, you have to have a high powered brick to charge it, because if you turn it off, or if it's off, it doesn't charge in its current state. Eventually it's gonna fix that problem. But so if the battery does run out in totality and you charge it with a low amperage wattage or low wattage or amperage brick, it will power it to the point where it turns on and it will just boot. And because there's not enough juice to keep the battery charged, it will just be in this kind of boot loop. And to alleviate that is you use like the more powerful bricks, and it will charge the battery at the same time as booting the phone, and that's enough power to get it going. So if ever this was to run out of power, the best thing to do, the only thing to do, is really to use one of those high powered bricks and to charge the guy, and away you go. Or alternatively, because the PinePhone is a throwback, so to speak, let's peel off the protective cover here. Wow. It's a throwback, so to speak. This phone can be fixed with no more than and disassembled with a Phillips screwdriver, which is really cool, because the back cover here, it pops off. And not only does it pop off, let's see if I can get to it. It's a removable battery. Not many phones, or no phones nowadays, have a removable battery, from what I understand. This is a Samsung J7 battery, so it is relatively common in the grand scheme of things. About $10 is this battery. It's 3,000 milliamps, which is meh. But the fact that it's removable is really cool. So nowadays, if you have a phone that this battery is wearing out and you want to replace it, it's a hassle to replace. Not the PinePhone. It's again, it's a throwback where you could just simply pop off the back cover, replace the battery, and you're good to go. That I love. And what's cool about it is that you could just you could repair it. You can see the screws right there. Let me see if I get a better view of that. So it has like a little. You can just repair the whole thing. It's totally repairable. And before I could even turn it on, I have to remove the battery. And this piece of tape here, let's see if I can remove it, because it's preventing connection to the jumper or to the connection over there. So it wasn't discharging during transportation. There we go, I just removed it. So I can connect it and get the PinePhone working. But one of the things that really makes this phone different than others, the security aspect, is right here. You could see it has these little jumpers right here. And from that, you could disable a variety of different things, including, let me just get a better close-up of those jumpers. Hopefully it's, there you go. And those jumpers, it controls like the Wi-Fi, the camera, the data on the phone, so the modem, a lot of different things, the mic. So if you want to disable those particular things through a hardware toggle, you can here with the PinePhone. So it gives you a layer of security that you don't get with other phones. So something to consider, something really cool. And I understand that I can just power this on, but it is not ready yet, because from what I understand, the software is still, well, it's flashed a couple of weeks ago, so it's a little bit outdated. So I'm going to have to rectify that. But for the time being, here it is. That's the unveiling of the PinePhone. Yeah, I'm going to do some more videos moving forward. I'll maybe do a first turn on in, maybe later today I'll give it and maybe do another video, or not, maybe tomorrow. But this is the beginning of it. Here's my journey towards total privacy, at least control of my privacy, and using Linux on a phone. So I hope you found this video to be informative, and not sure if it's gonna encourage you to buy one of these guys. I wouldn't recommend it, given the fact that it's still very, very early. It's very basic, very beta. Sorry, but yeah, I like the fact that this is unique. It's Linux and it's privacy. It's wonderful. So until next time, I hope you enjoy this video. There will be others. I'm going to share my progress to try to get this to be a user-friendly and daily driver. It may be an uphill battle that I can't win, but darn it, I'm going to try. So until then, take care.